It was supposed to be a simple flight, just a few hours in the sky, nothing unusual. But for Patricia Reeves, the 78-year-old mother of Hollywood icon Keanu Reeves, that journey would become the most humiliating and heartbreaking experience of her life. No one knew who she was, just a frail older woman in first class. At least, that's what they thought, the flight attendants whispered. The other passengers stared. And before she could even take her seat, Patricia was questioned, judged, and degraded. All because she didn't look like someone who belonged in first class. But what happened next? No one saw coming. Just as the situation spiraled out of control, a man stepped forward, calm, composed, and devastatingly familiar. Keanu Reeves. Not just an A-list actor, not just the son of the woman being mistreated, but the owner of the very airline they were flying on. This isn't just a story about humiliation and justice. It's about dignity, legacy, and the quiet power of those who protect their loved ones, no matter the cost. Chapter 1. The Woman in Seat 1. A. Patricia Reeves had always preferred to travel under the radar. A retired costume designer known for her elegance and warm spirit, she rarely played the celebrity card, even though her son's face was known to millions. Keanu had offered her his private jet, but she refused. "I want to be among the people," she'd said with a smile. That morning she walked into LAX with a modest suitcase and a printed boarding pass for first class. The flight, Los Angeles to Vancouver. The airline, Airline, sleek, exclusive, and known for luxury. What most passengers didn't know was that Keanu Reeves had quietly purchased a majority share of Airline after a dispute over their treatment of disabled passengers years earlier. Patricia approached the first-class counter with her ID and boarding pass. The gate agent gave her a long, skeptical look. "Ma'am, this is for first class." Patricia nodded. "Yes, that's right." The agent's eyes narrowed. "And you paid for this ticket yourself?" Patricia chuckled politely. "Yes, my son booked it for me." The agent leaned in, lowering her voice. "We've had problems with misunderstandings. You understand?" She didn't wait for a response. Instead, she picked up the phone and called a supervisor. Around her, other passengers were checking in without issue. No questions, no calls, just smiles and swift entries. But for Patricia, something felt off. Her heart sank. She had felt this before, years ago, in a different era, when people assumed a woman of her background, her appearance, didn't belong. But she said nothing. Not yet. Chapter 2. The Cold Welcome on Board. By the time Patricia made it through the gate and onto the aircraft, the damage had already begun. She shuffled down the jet bridge with grace and patience, clutching her small handbag. Her knees weren't what they used to be, but her spirit? Unshakable. Even so, the gate agent's insinuation echoed in her mind like turbulence she couldn't shake. As Patricia stepped into the cabin of the Airline A320, she smiled at the flight attendant stationed at the door. "Good morning," she said warmly. The attendant glanced at her without returning the gesture. "Boarding coach is that way, ma'am." Patricia blinked. "I'm in 1A." The attendant paused, clearly caught off guard. "You mean first class 1A?" Patricia handed over her boarding pass. The attendant scanned it, eyebrows rising. "Huh." That "huh" said everything. Not "welcome aboard," not "right this way," but a dismissive grunt of disbelief. "You can go ahead, then," the attendant muttered, already turning away to greet another passenger. Patricia made her way to her seat, a plush leather throne near the front window. Her body ached. Her hands trembled slightly as she settled in. She was about to take a deep breath, but before she could, another flight attendant approached. "Excuse me, ma'am," the woman said curtly. "We're going to need to see your ID again." Patricia looked up, puzzled. Why? I already showed it at the gate. This is just standard procedure, the attendant said, eyes cold. We've had issues. Issues. That word again. She reached into her bag and handed over her ID, trying to stay composed. The attendant examined it for an unusually long time, then walked away with it, without a word. Patricia sat there, now aware that the eyes of the entire first-class cabin were on her. Some of the passengers whispered, others stared openly. A man across the aisle leaned toward his wife and said, "She probably snuck up here." The humiliation was mounting, drop by drop. She wasn't dressed in designer fashion. Her hair was silver, tied back neatly. She wasn't carrying a Louis Vuitton purse or flashing a platinum credit card. She was just a mother. And that, to some, apparently wasn't enough. Chapter 3. In the presence of arrogance. The murmurs spread like wildfire. The businessman in 1C sneered. "Probably someone trying to get a free upgrade," he said aloud. His voice carried. Others chuckled. Patricia turned her head to the window, blinking back the sting in her eyes. She refused to cry. Not here. Not over this. The second flight attendant returned, ID in hand. "We verified it," she said in a tone that implied Patricia should be grateful. "But if you cause any disruptions or sit in the wrong seat, we'll have to move you." "I assure you," Patricia said softly, "I've flown before." "Well, it's not always obvious," the woman replied, spinning on her heel and walking away. The pain wasn't just in the words. It was in the way they were spoken, as if Patricia were invisible, as if she had done something wrong just by existing where she wasn't expected. Chapter 4. The Unexpected Passenger. Just as the cabin crew finished pre-boarding checks, a tall figure stepped through the aircraft door. Wearing a hoodie, sunglasses, and jeans, it was the kind of entrance that wouldn't turn heads in a busy terminal. But on this flight, everything changed the moment the hoodie came down. It was Keanu Reeves. Passengers gasped. Some whispered his name. Others stared in disbelief. The same gate agent who had questioned Patricia now ran up the aisle, suddenly attentive, her voice sweet and fake. "Mr. Reeves, we had no idea you'd be joining us today. You're usually on the executive manifest." Keanu smiled gently. "Yeah, change of plans. My mother wasn't feeling great, so I thought I'd ride along." He didn't look angry. Not yet. But his eyes scanned the cabin with focused precision until they landed on her. His mother, still sitting quietly in 1A, eyes on the window, fingers trembling in her lap. He walked over, placed a hand on her shoulder, and whispered, "Hey, Ma." Patricia looked up and managed a small smile. "Keanu, sweetheart, what are you doing here?" "I had a feeling I should check in," he said softly. Then he turned to the flight attendants. "Excuse me," he said in a low voice. "Could you come here for a moment?" They obeyed, eagerly now, smiling and flustered by the celebrity in their midst. But their smiles faded when they saw the look in his eyes. Chapter 5. You do know who she is, right? The cabin had gone quiet. Passengers strained to hear. Phones began discreetly recording. No one dared speak, not when Keanu Reeves was standing in the aisle, face to face with the flight attendants who had just humiliated his mother. Keanu's voice was calm, but there was an unmistakable edge to it. "I have one question," he said, eyes locked onto the lead attendant. "Do you know who this woman is?" The attendant blinked, her voice stammering. "Well, I mean, she didn't identify herself." "That's my mother," Keanu said simply. "Her name is Patricia Reeves." The attendant looked flustered. We didn't know." "You didn't ask," Keanu said, his voice tightening. The other attendant chimed in nervously. We were just doing standard protocol. Sometimes people sneak into first class. She had a first-class ticket, Keanu interrupted. Paid, verified, boarded properly, and yet she was treated like a criminal. Why? Neither woman answered. Keanu took a step closer. Because she's old, because she doesn't wear designer clothes, because she didn't look like she belonged in your perfect little first-class bubble. The silence was deafening. Patricia looked down, embarrassed. Keanu, don't... But he gently squeezed her shoulder. No, Mom. I'm not letting this go. Then, turning back to the attendants, he asked, Tell me something. Would you have done this if her last name was Reeves on the boarding pass? The two women exchanged glances, now visibly sweating. They had no answer. Chapter 6. The Revelation. By now the captain had been alerted. A disturbance in first class? Celebrity involved? He emerged from the cockpit, confusion on his face, until he saw Keanu. Mr. Reeves, he said, is everything okay? Keanu turned to him. Not really. My mother was humiliated on this flight before we even took off. The captain's eyes widened. Your mother? Keanu nodded. Yes, and by the way, I own this airline. Gasps rippled through the cabin. One passenger dropped their phone. Even the flight attendants looked like they had seen a ghost. The captain blinked. Sir, I didn't know. Apparently no one did, Keanu said, voice quiet but sharp. Which is fine. My mother doesn't want special treatment, but what she does deserve is basic respect. He turned back to the lead attendant. You didn't just fail as an employee, you failed as a human being. There was no shouting, no dramatic explosion, just truth, delivered like a scalpel. Chapter 7. Apologies too late. The attendants, now desperate, scrambled to fix what they had broken. We are so sorry, the lead one began. We didn't mean to offend. You did offend, Keanu cut in. You made her feel like she wasn't welcome. You judged her. The second attendant stepped forward, trying to save face. We'll offer her champagne, anything she wants. We'll upgrade. She's already in first class, Keanu said. You can't upgrade dignity. Patricia put a hand on her son's arm. Please, Keanu, let's not make this worse. He looked at her gently. It's already been made worse. I'm just making sure it doesn't happen to someone else. Then, turning back to the flight crew, from now on, my mother is flagged on every Aero-Zen flight, VIP clearance, and I want mandatory training for every employee, not about celebrities, about kindness. The captain nodded. Absolutely, sir, we'll make it right. But for Patricia, no policy could erase how she'd been made to feel, like a trespasser in a world she had every right to occupy. Chapter 8. The Eyes of the Cabin. The other passengers suddenly had opinions. The man in 1C who had earlier scoffed about her sneaking into first class now tried to smile politely at Patricia. I had no idea, ma'am. She looked at him, a soft smile on her face. You shouldn't need to know who someone is to treat them with decency. A woman 2 rows back applauded. Soon others followed. It wasn't a standing ovation, it wasn't performative. It was, perhaps, a moment of reflection. A realization that they had been complicit in silence. Patricia had become invisible to them the moment they decided she didn't look the part. Now she was seen. Chapter 9. Back in the sky, where she belonged. The flight eventually took off, though it was more than an hour delayed. Keanu sat beside his mother in 1B, still protective, still simmering. But Patricia reached over and touched his hand. Thank you, son, she whispered. I should have been here sooner, he replied. You were here exactly when I needed you. Outside the window, the California coastline disappeared beneath clouds. Inside the cabin, a silence settled, not the kind born of shame, but the kind that follows a lesson learned the hard way. Patricia sipped the tea the new attendant had brought her, one who was respectful, patient, and kind. Maybe change really had begun. Chapter 10. Headlines and Heat. By the time the plane landed in Vancouver, the story had already gone viral. Someone on board had uploaded a shaky video of Keanu confronting the flight attendants. The title, Keanu Reeves confronts airline staff for mistreating his elderly mother and reveals he owns the airline. It hit social media like wildfire. Within hours, the clip had over 10 million views. Hashtags like Respect Your Elders, Keanu the Boss, and Zen Scandal began trending worldwide. Major news outlets picked it up. CNN, Keanu Reeves shocks passengers by defending mother, reveals airline ownership. People magazine, Keanu Reeves quietly owned an airline. Now he's quietly redefining what leadership looks like. TMZ, don't mess with Mama Reeves. Inside Zen's corporate office in downtown LA, phones rang off the hook. Board members scrambled to control the narrative. PR teams released statements. Human resources departments launched internal investigations. But Keanu? He stayed quiet. He didn't do interviews. He didn't tweet about it. He didn't seek applause. Because it was never about that. It was about her and how no one, not even his own employees, would ever make Patricia Reeves feel small again. Chapter 11. A Mother's Grace. Despite the public attention, Patricia remained as she always had, humble, soft-spoken, and deeply gracious. She declined interviews. "I'm not the story," she told reporters outside her Vancouver condo. "I'm just a mother who raised a kind son." But people wanted more. Schools started citing the incident as a case study in ethics. Psychology blogs wrote about ageism in modern society. Influencers shared their own stories of being judged for their looks, their income, their perceived status. Patricia had unintentionally become a symbol, not of victimhood, but of quiet strength. Keanu visited her 2 days later, arriving with groceries and flowers. No bodyguards, no entourage, just a son checking in on his mom. As they sat on her balcony sipping tea, she looked out over the mountains and said, "You didn't have to do what you did, Keanu." He shrugged. "I did." "You embarrassed a lot of people," she added, half joking. "They embarrassed themselves," he replied. Then, after a pause, "You deserve more than quiet humiliation." Patricia's eyes filled, but she didn't cry. She simply reached for his hand. "You've always been a good man," she whispered, even when no one was looking. Chapter 12. Corporate Fallout. Back at Zen HQ, heads were rolling. The 2 flight attendants involved in the incident were placed on immediate suspension. After an internal review and additional footage corroborating Patricia's experience, both were terminated for conduct unbecoming of the company's values. Keanu didn't push for their firing. He asked only for accountability. "Let them learn," he told HR, "but let them go. Not because of who my mother is, but because of what they chose to be." The airline's CEO, appointed before Keanu acquired majority ownership, offered his resignation. Keanu declined it. "I don't want a scapegoat," he said. "I want a new culture." He brought in a diversity and sensitivity consultant. He created an executive position focused solely on customer experience. And he issued a memo to every Zen employee, which read, "This company is about more than luxury. It's about decency. Every person on every flight matters, no matter their seat, age, background, or status. If that's not what you stand for, this isn't the place for you." Chapter 13. Backlash and Balance. For every flood of praise that poured in online, a quieter storm was brewing behind closed doors. And this time, Keanu wasn't facing flight attendants. He was facing shareholders. Within days of the incident, Aerozen's stock dipped slightly. Analysts called it a PR overcorrection. Investors were anxious. Some accused Keanu of emotional leadership. Others warned that turning a customer service mistake into a public crusade would alienate high-tier clientele. One executive even dared to say, "We're a luxury brand, not a morality platform." Keanu sat quietly at the board table in downtown LA, dressed in his usual low-key manner, blazer over a plain shirt, no tie, hair tucked behind his ears. Then he leaned forward, hands clasped. "Let me be clear," he said. "We're not changing the brand. We're elevating the standard." One board member scoffed. "With all due respect, we can't train thousands of employees to be as kind as you are. It's not scalable." Keanu's gaze didn't flinch. "But disrespect is scalable, and it spreads faster than training ever will." Silence. He continued, "This isn't about optics. It's about principles. And if you think kindness costs more than negligence, you're not paying attention to the world anymore." The board took a vote on expanding the new Dignity training program. It passed, barely. Chapter 14. The public stands up. But while the business world debated efficiency and cost, the public had already made up its mind. Letters poured in to Aerozen, handwritten notes, emails, social media messages. Not just from fans, but from elderly travelers, nurses, caregivers, and everyday people who'd been dismissed, ignored, or humiliated while flying. One woman wrote, "I'm 84. I haven't flown in years because the last time I did, I was treated like luggage. I cried when I saw what your mother went through. Thank you for standing up, not just for her, but for all of us." A group of students at a New York high school started a campaign called Dignity Travels First. Their mission? To get other airlines to adopt similar customer conduct standards. Soon, Aerozen flights started seeing something new. Passengers giving up seats to elderly travelers, thanking flight crews more often, and even asking for less alcohol and more herbal tea. What Mrs. Reeves would want, they joked. It was becoming a movement. Patricia had gone viral without ever posting a thing. Chapter 15. Private Moments in a Public Storm. Behind the headlines and headlines, Keanu and Patricia were just mother and son again. One evening, Keanu visited her with takeout. Thai food, her favorite. They sat at the small kitchen table, the news playing quietly in the background. Patricia looked up, concerned. "Are you tired, darling?" Keanu chuckled. "I'm always tired." She smiled. "I worry about you." He set down his chopsticks and looked at her. "I'm not tired because of this, Ma. I'm tired because I didn't do it sooner. I let my name sit on the letterhead while people like you were being pushed around." She reached out, cupping his hand. "You did it when it mattered," she said. "That's enough." They sat in silence for a long moment, just being. No fame, no boardrooms, no flights, just family. Chapter 16. When Competitors Strike. In the airline industry, turbulence doesn't just come from the skies, it comes from the competition. Within a week of the viral incident, Aerozen's rivals saw an opportunity. One airline ran a sleek ad campaign. "First class isn't just a seat, it's an experience you'll never forget, for the right reasons." Their slogan flashed across TV screens and YouTube pre-rolls. The message was clear: "We won't humiliate your mom." Another competitor offered steep discounts to Aerozen's premium customers. "Feeling mistreated? Come fly with us." News articles speculated, is Keanu Reeves too soft to lead? The actor who took customer service too personally. From The Matrix to middle management, a Hollywood experiment goes too far. Internally, Aerozen's marketing team wanted to clap back. "We should run a campaign of our own," they said. "Show strength. Fight fire with fire." But Keanu refused. "No spin. No counterattack," he said. "Let them talk. Let them take their shots." The team stared, stunned. "We'll win not by shouting louder," he continued, "but by flying higher." Chapter 18. Letters to Patricia. Back at her condo, Patricia began receiving letters, hundreds, from New Zealand, from South Korea, from Montana, from retired teachers, grandmothers, war veterans, and single moms. They weren't fan letters. They were thank you letters. Thank you for being brave without raising your voice. You reminded the world that kindness is still powerful. You didn't just raise a good son. You raised a man who sees people. Patricia kept them in a shoebox at first, then in 2, then in 5. Eventually, Keanu had custom books made, leather-bound, each labeled Letters to Mom. Patricia wept the first time she held them. Chapter 19. The interview that changed everything. Months later, Keanu agreed to one, and only one, interview. It wasn't with a flashy network or a viral podcast. It was with a small Canadian radio station, the same one that had aired his first ever voice acting clip when he was 18. The host asked, "Why didn't you go public sooner?" Keanu leaned back, thoughtful. "Because I didn't want this to be about me, or even about my mom. I wanted people to see how often we all look past someone, just because they're older, or quiet, or don't look like they belong." He continued, "I don't care if you're a millionaire or flying on points. Everyone gets tired. Everyone wants dignity. That's not luxury. That's humanity." The interview was uploaded quietly, but it was downloaded millions of times within days. Chapter 20. The man behind the myth. As public admiration for Keanu surged again, interviews, speaking gigs, and film offers poured in. He turned most of them down. He wasn't interested in being a brand ambassador for empathy. He was interested in living it. In one rare press conference, a reporter asked, "Why do you care so much? You could have just fired those flight attendants and walked away." Keanu answered, "Because the world doesn't get better when you punish people. It gets better when you teach them what dignity looks like, and you make sure they never forget it. My mother taught me that. The hard way." Chapter 21. A story told in silence. Months later, a documentary team approached Keanu to make a film about the incident. He declined, but he gave them permission to interview others, Aerozen staff, Patricia's neighbors, elderly travelers, and even one of the fired flight attendants who had since gone through a care-based employment program and started working at a retirement center. The documentary was called The Woman in Seat 3A. Patricia never appeared on camera. She said only one thing, in a handwritten note shared at the end of the film. "Sometimes, to change the world, you don't need a microphone. You just need someone who won't let you be forgotten." Chapter 22. Full Circle 1. Bright spring morning, a young woman boarded the Patricia flight to Tokyo. She was nervous. It was her first time flying overseas. She clutched a worn boarding pass and looked lost. An older woman beside her, white hair, soft eyes, reached over and said gently, "Can I help you with that?" The young woman smiled. "Yes, please." They spoke for a moment. Then, as the flight attendant came by, the older woman leaned over and said, "This is her first time flying. Let's make it a good one." The attendant nodded. "Of course, ma'am." Later, the young woman turned to her and asked, "Are you traveling alone?" The older woman nodded. "I always travel alone, but today I don't feel so alone." The young woman smiled and introduced herself. The woman smiled back. "I'm Patricia." The name didn't register at first. But when the plane took off and the in-flight welcome message mentioned her name, the young woman's eyes went wide. "You're that Patricia?" She simply smiled and returned to her tea.